Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grow With Us. My name is Evan Barton, and I'm your host who helps create conversations with the innovators and leaders of a growing tech center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The Grow With Us podcast highlights the work of community leaders, tech entrepreneurs, nonprofit professionals, and talent development advocates in Tulsa. Grow With Us is a podcast of In Tulsa. In Tulsa's mission is to connect talented individuals and companies to stimulate economic growth in Tulsa and to create more prosperous communities across the region. Each episode, Grow With Us discusses the growth of opportunities, the growth of communities striving for change, or the tech and innovation that is changing the landscape of Tulsa. On this episode of Grow With Us, I speak with Grace Harrington Qissy, the Director of Corporate Partnerships at Genesys Works. Grace and I discuss her experience in the Tulsa Remote program, Builders and Backers Idea Accelerator program, and the impact of Genesys Works internship accessibility work in Tulsa. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Grow With Us. I'm so excited to welcome Grace Harrington Qissy to the podcast today. Grace, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
This is going to be great. I'm really excited to be connected. We talked about this when we had coffee last week, like the many overlapping circles of our networks, which I love.
Yes.
That's SMALSA for you, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm really excited to have you on and kind of highlight your story and talk about things that I know you're passionate about, passions that we share. And this is going to be a great episode. I'm so excited.
I'm excited as well.
Well, let's go ahead and get it kicked off. I'd
Sure.
love for you to, introduce yourself and tell us your story in whatever way you're comfortable.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Grace Harrington Qissy. I have lived in Tulsa about 3.5 years now, moved via Tulsa Remote from the DC area. Really only lived in DC for COVID time. Spent the first well over a decade of my adult life predominantly out in Utah. That's where I met my now husband. I gave birth to my wonderful 5-year-old. We just didn't want to raise kids there. We just didn't want to raise them in that culture. And then really, Tulsa really wasn't on our radar at all.
Yeah.
We thought, we're going to be out in the DC area forever. My parents and all my family live out east. And then during COVID, everybody's life kind of blew up.
Yeah.
My husband ended up getting stuck abroad we didn't realize it was going to be 2 years at the time.
Wow.
And being a single parent in DC is not fun. So when I heard about Tulsa Remote, it just kind of made sense. My mom grew up here. She graduated from Memorial High School. So coming here wasn't foreign, but it was not something I ever saw myself doing.
Yeah.
But I figured, I can do anything for a year. Worst case scenario, I'm back out here. But within a few months, it was pretty apparent that we were staying. And fortunately, my family all moved out here with me. My sisters, I have friends who've moved. My husband since got his visa and he recently got his green card. And
It's amazing.
Life's been good. It's been really good.
I'm so glad to hear that. That's amazing. And I love that phrase. That's absolutely something that TR should use is I can do anything for a year. And the anything is Tulsa,
Yes.
like moving here. It's really interesting. Like, I think that philosophy has been a lot of people's stories and getting into Tulsa. I didn't know that it wasn't on my radar. It wasn't a place that I had considered. Or in your case, you also have this interesting familial connection that didn't really come back into your life until TR was, I guess, a thing. And then also the pandemic also prompted questions of where you want to raise a family, where you want to do all of those things. And so yeah, you can do anything for a year, and Tulsa was the anything.
3.5 years later, we're here.
I love that. Well, and I think this transitions great into our next question too. Like, what has your relationship with Tulsa been like in these 3.5 years? I mean, lots of things. The city's changed so much in such a short amount of time. I talk about it pretty much every time I have an episode, just because it's a regular question. But for me, I mean, just within 3 years, I could name 5 different things that have changed for
1,000%.
me. But I'm curious from your perspective, what are some of those things?
Yeah, it's interesting because my mom's family, they've all stayed in the Tulsa area. And so I kind of romanticized moving here, what that relationship would look like.
Yeah.
I've had kind of a strained relationship with most of them for most of my adult life. And I thought, I'm bringing my grandparents' first granddaughter.
Yeah.
They're going to love her. Everybody loves her. It's going to be great. Unfortunately, we weren't as welcome the arms weren't quite as wide open as we had hoped. But Tulsa Remote really made it easy for us to have that soft landing, find community, find our place. And, sweet little Millie has lots of aunts and uncles that are, Tulsa Remote, but also not Tulsa Remoters.
Yeah.
At this point, our community has reached far beyond TR.
Yeah.
Going from being an active Tulsa Remote member, for me, it was really important to not let having a toddler keep me from enjoying all the things that Tulsa Remote offers its members.
Yeah.
And so she was always with me. I was always, the TR mom. And being able to kind of transition into being this active participant of the Alumni Ambassador Program, helping other folks, helping specifically more parents kind of figure out, what's important to you. And, what me as a parent was important in Tulsa may not be the same as it is for you.
Yeah.
Really understanding who your child is, what their strengths are, what kind of things are going to work for them, and helping them kind of navigate that. But then also just kind of figuring out, taking that Tulsa Remote badge off and putting on, I am a Tulsan.
Exactly. When's the
Tulsa
conversion?
Right. And it's been fun. I've had a great transition the last couple of years into joining the Junior League of Tulsa, really leaned into that community. I'm very community oriented, very volunteer and service oriented. That's been great. I've been able to join a few boards in areas that I really feel passionate about and helping to see that impact. As well as, we were kind of discussing before getting on here, I'm really an advocate for refugees and being able to be involved in that resettlement efforts. It's huge in Tulsa. People don't realize how often they're coming and where they're coming from. It's not just, Syria and Afghanistan. Guatemalans, Ethiopians, they're coming from everywhere, and being able to kind of help them with that soft landing the same way TR does for its members. Because, you'll hear TR members say, moving to Tulsa, you kind of feel like a refugee sometimes because you're coming from a place that a lot of us, it's very different from Tulsa, and coming here and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so different.
Yeah.
But really kind of figuring out the beauty of how does my life look here has been amazing. And being involved in kind of the tech startup space and being able to bring some of my background into being able to do some consulting with small tech companies and really just navigating and finding who I am outside of the ecosystem and outside of Tulsa Remote has been fun.
And who you are with your identities too, as a mom, as a, not, I would say like baked in native Tulsan, like at least your mom has the experience of being here and all those things. And I think you bring up a really interesting conversation that might kind of connect to our next question too. But I think the partner experience of a Tulsa Remoter, like being the one accepted into TR and bringing someone else along.
Yes.
Like I've heard kind of like conversations about how that experience can be interesting because they don't necessarily like let you into the Slack, which is fine. It's their process, and obviously, it's the community is protected in many ways. But there are ways to like bring partners around. There are ways to also like be a mom and TR and have those things. I'm really glad you navigated that without like any sort of like shame, for lack of a better word. Because like sometimes I feel like I'm not a parent, but like. There has been like an adult divergence in some ways of like people with kids or the people without
1,000%.
Like you're either in the kid crew and you don't hang out with the kidless crew, or like there's just very few middle grounds where those two, I guess, like identities can kind of converge in some ways. So I don't know. I guess I'll just ask you this: what's your husband's experience being a partner of a TR member and as involved as you've been?
Yeah.
What's it kind of been like for him?
Well, and it's been interesting for him because, again, with his immigration stuff, I was here for 18, 19 months.
Yeah, you laid the foundation for sure.
So it wasn't even like he came here with me and we navigated it together. I already had a thriving life here.
Yeah.
I had already bought 2 homes here. I had already been part of Tulsa Remote and joined some boards, joined different organizations, gotten involved in PTA, different things. And so it was nice because for me, I'm very outgoing, very much that extrovert. Let's just do all the things and be friends with all the people. And he's, the yin to my yang. He's very much more the homebody. You kind of have to drag him out. But once he's out, he's like, okay, this is fun. I'm enjoying this. And, I remember his first Saturday in town, it was his first Saturday in town. And I had been doing some consulting with Act House and some of their companies, and they had their big pitch night, and we were invited to the after party. And I have great videos and pictures of my husband just going wild with a bunch of, these
founders
and, I see him over there talking with some of the Atento, Mike Bosch and different folks. And, he just kind of comes back and he's like, oh yeah, I was talking to the guy. He said he's like, kind of, runs this place. I was like, yeah,
he kind of
does. Yeah, he's in charge of this area. Yeah, you're right. And he's like, we lived in DC. We lived in Salt Lake. We lived in these different places. And he's like, a lot of people have insight into our family story because you've already been here and they know what a blessing it is that I'm now here.
Yeah.
And it's been really great for him because he didn't come and have work authorization initially. We had to wait for that. It took quite a while, but all these people have just been rallying around him and saying, let me know what I can do.
Yeah.
How can I help you? I was able to click in during Ramadan, our first year here, when it was just my daughter and me with the Muslim community. And so I automatically had husbands of friends to kind of have him tap into.
Yeah.
To have that kind of cultural connection. And so it's been nice to be able to kind of hand him community, but he's also slowly been figuring out who are my people outside of those that Grace has connected me with, and joined like a little soccer league at Soccer City.
That's
and
awesome.
A few different things. So it's been fun to kind of watch him figure out who he is and kind of comparing my experience of coming through Tulsa Remote and having that Tulsa Remote experience and then figuring out who I am outside of TR. And it's been fun watching him have that same kind of experience, but as who am I, Hassan, as Grace's husband, but who am I as Hassan myself in Tulsa.
No, that's so interesting. And I like that. I feel like I would be just like you. and actually in many ways I did have an experience similar to this with like bringing a partner here and kind of having a landscape to navigate that I was familiar with, but the other person wasn't. But then there's COVID things, and it was like just so many different factors at play in terms of like how, young adults can really navigate a city that's growing like Tulsa, a city that has like, I don't know, like being in, I thought in some ways where you're going with that story, Hassan was going to say like, I've never been in a room with a VC, like a person who, runs this organization or whatever. And I'm like, that is kind of something that's very Tulsa.
Very unique.
And I don't know, some people might know how to put themselves in that situation, way earlier on in their lives or their professional careers. But like, I think in Tulsa, sometimes you stumble into those situations, and that's sometimes really cool to experience.
Totally.
Like, I wonder what they talked about.
I have no idea. But I know that he talked with some of the other, portfolio company founders, and, he has a background in mechanical engineering, but his education in the States is IT and information systems. And so a lot of folks are like, please reach out to me.
Yeah. We need your specialized skills.
Right. But no, it's absolutely true what you say about being in the same space as, VC founders and, presidents of these organizations and everything, because, Salt Lake City, Silicon Slopes.
Yeah.
I was part of watching Salt Lake become this tech hub in, the late 2000s, early 2010s. And Tulsa's very reminiscent of kind of those early days. And back when it was this like, oh, you work for a software company? So do you know how to build computers? And it's like, no, actually I sell the software.
Yeah.
Not all of us know the back ends of things.
Yeah.
And I think that Tulsa is very much in a position of, if we play our cards right, we could very easily have a similar kind of experience as Salt Lake did, around 2010, and just this massive growth. And we went back to Salt Lake for the first time about this time last year. And it was the first time we'd been back in 4 years. And it was just like, oh my gosh, it has blown up. And just you drive the highway from Provo to Salt Lake and you're like, oh my gosh, it's just townhouses and buildings and, fancy car lots. You're like, this used to be, Cowtown, and now there's, a Maserati dealership here. What is happening here?
Those Real Housewives have really gotten I love that show.
Real Housewives of Salt Lake, I Will Die on the Hill is the best Real Housewives franchise.
Such a good one. Well, I think it's interesting, like the frame of reference being like Salt Lake City. I think for a long time when I got to Tulsa and kind of started navigating this professional space in a lot of ways, the comparison was Austin. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I do think that obviously there's points of comparing and contrasting for both. I think Austin in some ways like geographically matches like some of the vibes of Tulsa, whereas like maybe the sense and sensibility of like a like religious community in some ways more matches like Oklahoma and Tulsa in some ways. The episode of like We're Here that featured Tulsa, like they literally in the first 5 minutes like go through like a bunch of B-roll of like church, and it's, I mean, that's probably, I don't know if that's the experience in Salt Lake, but there is like kind of that you're in a religious community in some ways.
1,000%.
So I don't know, I think that these two like up and coming like cities that aren't coastal but are like becoming hubs for young people in terms of the tech boom, the economic development. Like, I don't know. It's really interesting to kind of compare and contrast those, all three of our cities and see kind of what a Tulsan would say about a Salt Lake City place or an Austin in some ways. So I'm going to Austin next week. I'll let you know how it is.
I love Austin. I've got a conference down there in a couple weeks, so that should be fun.
Yes. So we've talked a lot about programs and different things throughout Tulsa that have been a part of your story. And one that has come up quite a bit is the Tulsa Remote program. Can you speak a little bit more to like the specific impact that the program has had on you personally?
Absolutely. So for me, beyond just coming to a new city and, kind of like I said, thinking my experience was going to be something that it wasn't, it really helped me go, okay, how am I going to navigate life in Tulsa? And I really came in with this mentality of just say yes. If I see something in the Tulsa Remote newsletter or on Slack that kind of piques my interest, I'm going to show up.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most important things that a Tulsa Remoter can do, especially in that first year, is show up. Guess what? Everybody in Tulsa Remote has been new here at some point. Nobody's going to look at you and think, ooh, why are you here?
Who's the newbie over here?
Right. Because I mean, it's literally,
newbies,
right. It's literally this conversation, what's your name? Where'd you move from? What do you do? Like, that's just kind of how Tulsa Remote works. And so for me, I think just really taking that, being able to figure out who am I seeing in Slack that seems to have similar interests to me, being able to utilize 36 Degrees North, now Gradient.
Yeah.
Their rebrand just happened yesterday.
Just happened.
Yes. Using that membership to be able to meet people in kind of that safe, neutral space, meet people at member lunches, meet people at Tulsa Remote happy hours, different things, and just really be able to quickly tap into who are my people here. And I like that you mentioned the fact that, people typically kind of fall into that bucket of I'm a parent or I'm not.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the issues that a lot of Tulsa Remoters run into, especially as parents, is they're like, well, I'm not going to show up because I have kids. And Tulsa Remote seems like most people don't have kids. And it's like, well, there's actually a lot of us with kids. Don't be scared to show up with your kids. But also, most people in Tulsa Remote have never made me feel less than or weird for bringing my kid along. A lot of times people in Tulsa Remote are like, wait, where's Millie? And I'm like, it's noon on Tuesday. She is at school.
she's where she's supposed to be.
Right. She's in class where she needs to be right now. But it's also just kind of helped me. Like I said, I wouldn't have known about Junior League. I wouldn't have known about Act House. I mean, probably eventually because of the person I am, I would have, but not nearly as quickly.
Yeah.
And being able to tap into all these resources so quickly and being able to be in rooms with, within my first couple months in Tulsa, through Tulsa Remote events, I was in the same room as, Allison Anthony, United Way, head of United Way, and, the same space as Travis Myers and all these different people who are beloved Tulsans, who are influential folks, and they genuinely care about helping Tulsa Remoters transition and figure out how do we keep you here?
Yeah.
And I think that's just been such a beautiful part of our story, is being able to really utilize the resources that TR gives its members, and don't sleep on it. Don't just come to Tulsa with Tulsa Remote, take your 10 grand and tap out and say, peace out. I mean, admittedly, a lot of my family has moved through Tulsa Remote and mostly don't really use a lot of the resources. I'm like, you guys,
what's going on?
You didn't even get your headshots. Like, come on. There's so many great things, but to each their own.
Yeah.
They've all kind of navigated their own lives. We're like, how much more quickly would you have kind of assimilated into your space had you leaned into it? Because TR is a huge part of my story, but today, almost 4 years later, it's not really.
Yeah.
But it is a huge part of how I got to where I am. And I'm able to kind of, even just earlier this week, I was having coffee with some of the folks from the Broken Arrow Chamber and trying to discuss, how do we attract manufacturing and aerospace folks into Broken Arrow? And I was like, maybe I'll tap in Justin Harlan. He oversees all kinds of programming for attracting people to Tulsa beyond just Tulsa Remote, and tapped in Justin, and that conversation's going, and just being able to make those quick connections and then be able to use those connections later to help build community has been beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. I think something that I sometimes tell people is that I was like a TR hater when I first moved here, mostly because it was something I didn't understand, and in a lot of ways, I think the whole concept was it was fleshed out from their side, but not fleshed out as a concept for me in terms of why would a city choose to do this, or why would a program do something like this in my town. And it was really blowing up in Tulsa before it was blowing up anywhere else. I mean, this program has been essentially modeled after all across the country now. And, within, I guess, 6 months of me being here, I ended up meeting a Tulsa Remoter that was working on a contract that was related to the work that I was doing. And then we were chatting, and she actually sat on the board at Animal Rescue Foundation of Tulsa. And because every time we were on Zoom, I'd see she had 6 cats and 4 dogs and, this dog's doing this. And then she was able to I was like, how do you have all these animals or whatever? And it started the conversation about well, I'm looking for a cat. And she's like, oh, I've got 8 cats that I can essentially you can have a menu and whatever. And I ended up getting my cat through a Tulsa Remoter within 6 months of me being back. And I was like, okay, maybe I really get what Tulsa Remote's all about.
Yes.
And break it down in terms of what that means, what that meant for me. It's someone that, didn't have any experience in Tulsa came to Tulsa. In one of the first cohorts, had 2 years of understanding what the landscape was like here, and has their own house through their own personal ventures and all of those things, enough to house animals, enough to foster, enough to be a part of a board, enough to give back to the community in that way, and then continue to share that in 15 to 30 minute work conversations with anyone that's on the Zoom. That is I think a real community impact, and that's one person.
Right.
And Tulsa Remote has brought, nearly over 1,000 members to town now.
Yeah. 3,000.
3,000. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was like,
we had our
1 or 3.
Year 3,000 party a couple months ago, and that was, 3,000 members.
It's amazing.
Crap.
And the retention rate is super high on that as well. I mean, I really have seen, so at this point, the program's been running for nearly 6 years. It's something that continues to build on itself. The longer people stay, the more those people get connected. And you're a great example of how, it's a part of my introduction to the city, but not a part. It's a chapter in my story. All of those metaphors.
Right.
But I think you're really embodying that. It was a leaping off point, or at least a landscape in which I can navigate. And now that I have that, now I'm making moves on my own. I'm building on those. I'm building community where there still might not have been community in those spaces because of someone like you not being here. And now you're here. So
when it's, I think it's really great to be able to look at yourself and say, would I be where I am today without this program?
Yeah.
Probably not. Just because we wouldn't have the same access as we do as Tulsa Remoters. I hear from people who move to Tulsa without Tulsa Remote all the time, kind of the same thing as you, like, you guys get spoon-fed. And it's like, we do. You're right. We do. But we made the sacrifice to move here. Now, fortunately, do I see it as a sacrifice today? No, but making that decision to uproot your life and move away from what move away from family. Fortunately for me, my family followed me here, but not everybody has that experience. And being able to take that chance on a new place and then be able to say, cool, this is that part of my story. It has been a huge part of my story, but now today, who am I outside of it? I think is something all Tulsa Remoters need to be very cognizant of. And be able to not just look at everything, because I do think that there are times because of Tulsa Remote and the access that we get, there can be sometimes a lack of gratitude and a feeling of, I'm owed this. And it's like, you are not owed anything, actually.
You actually were given what you were owed.
Right. And you owe Tulsa a part of you. That's part of our interview to get into Tulsa Remote is explaining, what do you want to give back? And if you're not going to give back, and if you're just going to give lip service,
that's interesting.
Is 10 grand really going to be life-changing for most of us? Probably not, especially when you're talking, it cost me more than 10 grand to move here.
To move here, absolutely. And in 2024, I mean, there's many factors that contribute to that dollar amount not being as valuable to some people. But I think what you're getting at is like, it's all how you navigate the process of receiving that, getting it, and then like, this is how I'm going to spend this 12 months. And, some people it's shorter than 12 months if they, end up not continuing the program. But then there's many people like you who have been, now it's 4 years. Right. And there's this like building on.
And being able to figure out, at what point, because Tulsa Remote hasn't done their job with you. They haven't done a good job if, I were still coming to all the events and doing all the Tulsa Remote things. You need to eventually figure out, who am I outside of TR? Who am I in this city? And a lot of that is that giving back. A lot of that is, part of creating community is figuring out, how do I give back to the community? And if you're not using those first 12 months to make those connections, to figure out, how am I going to get to where my place is? And you're still, years later, relying on TR for your social. Come on now. You can have it to where all of your friends are TR. That's fine. But you shouldn't still years later, like, I'm going to every single TR event.
For the free booze.
Right. Like, come on now. No.
They've actually cut back on that, so don't.
They have, yes. I remember when I first got here, it was, open bar all the time. And now it's, get your 2 drink tickets.
Yes, exactly.
And that's part of that lack of gratitude. I've heard a lot of folks who've been here a while, like, well, we used to have open bar. Get over yourself.
Times are changing.
Hush. Be grateful.
Well, I mean, I think we've come to a really cool point in this conversation just to like wrap up the TR stuff. I think that it's absolutely what you make of it. It is a opportunity, and with any opportunity, there's good things, bad things, things you can do with that opportunity, or things you can do to squander it. So
1,000%.
I'd love to kind of pivot a little bit into another program that has, intersected us in some ways. The Builders of Backers program.
Yeah.
We've both had the opportunity to participate in that program in the same cohort last fall. I'm pretty sure. Oh my gosh, I'm going to say a year ago. It's insane. I would love to kind of hear like what your experience with the program was like, what the project was, all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I kind of applied on a whim. I think, I feel like people who apply for the Idea Accelerator is either, I've had this idea, or I've been working on this idea for ages and I just need some help, or you kind of fall in the same bucket as you and me. And it's like, I have an idea that maybe is cool, but they probably won't take it, And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm actually they liked it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I stumbled into it. I have an older sister who has cerebral palsy. I've been involved in lots of different, spaces for developmentally disabled folks. Back in college, I worked with children with autism and Down syndrome. And I really wanted to create a space for Tulsans who are neurodivergent to help them figure out, how do I navigate romantic relationships? And so what came of it was this idea of Capable Cupid. I'm kind of in this weird space right now, figuring out, is it going to continue to be focused on romantic relationships? Because I did my launch event back in June using the funds from Builders and Backers. And it was interesting because working with my builder in residence, Nick, he was great. We actually went to the same school in Utah.
Oh, that's crazy.
I know. Super crazy. And so that was awesome. But, kind of going back and forth with him and with Donna and some different folks with Builders and Backers about, what if I make it wide and let it be, whatever kind of relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, whatever. And they, really focus on, be really precise.
Like testing your hypothesis.
Right.
Basically.
Right. Yeah. And I'm trying to figure out right now, because at my launch event, so many of the folks that showed up were not kind of those more like autism and that kind of bucket of more neurodivergent. It was a lot more severe kind of developmentally disabled folks who showed up, and really just kind of looking for community, looking for social events, looking for friendshipping opportunities. Because once folks graduate high school who are, considered special needs on IEPs and things, their resources almost disappear.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's, my older sister, watching her navigate life beyond high school, she's very social. She's 40, but she's forever, 8-9 years old.
Yeah.
But she's super social, and being able to find opportunities for her to make those connections. And, she always has to have a caregiver with her. And being able to provide those spaces where people know, okay, everybody who's here is at least similar to me.
Yeah.
Versus walking into, maybe a networking event where it's like, am I the only one?
Yeah.
Can be scary.
I love that idea. I think it's so necessary in terms of like, I mean, it could be the caregivers and the folks that need the assistance with the developmental disabilities, like that kind of need that community as well. It's like I'm in a room full of everyone who understands what I'm going through or what I've gone through, and I think my stepmom works with folks on the spectrum in similar ways, and one of the things that I love that she says is like just presuming competence, and that's in everything. That's in social interaction. That's in like mental capacity and so many things. Like to look at someone and see them as a human being first can kind of like, I think, allow you to open up the possibility or just the framework that someone might need socialization. Like it sounds like your sister in many ways like enjoys that type of socialization. But for a community or at least in a culture that we live in, it's not always, like you said, the resources there aren't always there. So I love that. That's the angle of remind me the name of it again.
Capable Cupid. Trying to figure out if we're going to rebrand, because I feel like, I'm trying to figure out moving forward, am I going to keep pushing more this romantic side of things? Or do I open it back up to this idea of all relationships, friendshipping, fellowshipping? If you find a romantic partner, amazing. Good for you.
That's the Cupid part.
Or, so I'm in this interesting space with it right now of really trying to figure out what is the best way to serve the folks who, we talk about DEI and, creating safe spaces. And I feel like as much as lots of other groups feel marginalized, I feel like, neurodivergent and developmentally disabled people are often overlooked. Because so much of the time they don't have their own voice. They are reliant on their caregivers. And a lot of times caregivers just don't have the capacity because they got to take care of themselves and this other person. And their needs, again, if we treated developmentally disabled and neurodivergent folks the same way we treat other marginalized communities, there wouldn't be such a stark, oh my gosh, once I'm out of high school, what happens?
Yeah.
So it's been interesting. I've joined the board at ARC of Oklahoma since doing Builders and Backers, and they focus on developmental disabilities and things like that. And so being able to kind of chat with folks who work in it, I've become really close with the folks at Autism Foundation of Oklahoma.
Awesome.
And just really navigating, what do these folks need? What do they want? And being able to get feedback. So it's an interesting space right now. And I'm hoping that by January 1, I have a better idea of what is it moving forward.
Yeah.
And is Capable Cupid still what it will be? Or will it be a complete rebrand? I don't know.
I'm excited to find out.
So am I.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I mean, just to zoom out slightly on the journey, in so many ways, like you're teasing out this idea, figuring out what's working, what's not, taking the feedback and understanding what, the launch event looked like versus now what it looks like in your head in terms of the different types of relationship. You're getting the space to do that. And that process is something like I'm obviously going through with my project as well. It's such a fun process to be an entrepreneur and to work through those things. I love that we're both on that journey together. So if there's any way I can support you, this is my official.
I'll tap in.
I will tap
in for questions and things in the future.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about one more intersecting circle of ours is both working in this like nonprofit internship accessibility space. Yeah, you specifically with high school students through Genesys Works, and me with Campus Tulsa for undergraduates and master's, PhD folks. I'd love to hear a little bit more about Genesys Works and some of the goals that you all have.
Definitely. So I moved here having been in software sales for over a decade. In the last couple of years, just kind of in this identity crisis of, do I want to stay in sales? I don't know, whatever. And had heard about Genesys Works probably 6 months or so prior to actually joining Genesys Works. Another Tulsa Remoter who's a boomerang. She, went to Booker T. Her family still lives in the area. She was hired on as the executive director when Genesys Works came to Tulsa. So Genesys Works, they've been operating for about 20 years in much larger cities, Houston, New York, Chicago, DC, Bay Area. And Tulsa's our first mid-sized city. And so navigating what works in the big cities versus here, what are struggles that they have that we don't have, what are struggles we have that they don't have, has been interesting. And she, my executive director, Karnika, she had put out on the Tulsa Remote Slack asking for folks to offer volunteer opportunities for doing mock interviews and helping the young professionals go over their resumes, LinkedIn, and kind of give feedback. And so that's how I first clicked in with Genesys Works and just kind of followed along. And I was like, I love this. Their focus is on helping underserved young people in the inner city community get college and career ready. And the students go through, during their junior year, our programs team, they're tabling and meeting with high school juniors. It'll kick off here in the next couple weeks, and they'll do that through the spring. And then once that cohort is established, then they go through 8 weeks of summer training. They meet with us for 20 hours a week, early in the morning. So you already know that these students are dedicated to their futures because
they're showing up.
Right? They're taking their summers, the mornings of their summers to be like, okay, I'm going to be there at
I'm going to be college and career ready.
Yes. And they're getting high school credit. They're getting college credit for that.
Awesome.
They're meeting with, we brought executives from Williams, from Mesa, Helmrich and Payne. The mayor came, great folks.
Yeah.
But around this time last year, Genesys Works had posted a position for Director of Corporate Partnerships. And reading that, I was like, oh, that's sales. That's my space.
Yeah.
I had kind of toyed around with the idea of joining a nonprofit, but I'm like,
in what capacity?
as a sales? Yeah, my background's in sales. I don't know that I want to jump into, grants and development kind of work. I'm not sure that that's where I would thrive.
Yeah.
As much as I would like to think that I have the organizational and writing skills to do phenomenal grants, I'm probably not. So this just felt great because it was like, okay, maybe. And, went through the interview process, and it has been great. It's been hard. It's been beautiful. I think some of the struggles that we have in Tulsa versus some of the other cities, obviously transportation, when you're talking about underserved youth, that's hard in this town.
Absolutely.
Our public transit, I think that's one of the big barriers for us potentially getting to where Austin and Salt Lake are. I say it all the time, is our lack of public transit. Salt Lake really worked on that when they were building up.
Yeah.
So we've got to get a better handle on that. But then also, it's interesting because in the bigger cities, getting that first meeting is a lot harder than it is here.
Yeah.
But in those big cities, once they get the first meeting, a lot of times things just kind of naturally progress better than they do here. Here, I can get a first meeting with most people pretty easily. But I think a lot of Tulsa and a lot of these legacy companies that have been here for so long are scared of change.
Yeah, or comfortable where they are.
Right. Why fix what's not broken? Yeah. And, selling this value of, a 17, 18, 19-year-old young person who, doesn't have a network, who doesn't have their high school diploma yet, can be hard.
Yeah.
We work as similar to a staffing agency, and, you want us to pay how much for a kid?
Yeah.
That can be hard, but I think it's really cool to kind of see which organizations are saying, I absolutely see the value. Leonelle Thompson over at Williams, amazing. She's like,
yes,
high school kids are actually the best for internships because they are just willing and excited to learn and be molded. They don't take things offensively. And I love when she talks to folks about these young people, because it's like, oh, well, if Williams can do it, then why can't we?
Yeah.
And I mean, we've had a partnership with Williams in Houston for years, and she was part of that partnership and has been a huge part of our success here. And so it's been a cool journey to go from this corporate space into the nonprofit space. I love networking. I love this city.
Yeah.
Big fan of Tulsa. And so being able to make these connections with folks who, C-level folks within these great organizations, and hear, what are your DEI initiatives?
Yeah. What
is your, CSR initiative? What do these things look like? What does your early career pipeline look like? Why import folks from other cities if we have this rich pool of young people here in Tulsa who, if we don't get them in front of companies like yours, we could lose them to Austin. Please no. Let's keep them here.
Exactly. No, I love that. I think in so many ways it's been connected to a lot of the work that I've been doing for, since I moved back to Tulsa, and the whole concept of like building an early career talent pool, building a talent pool that is Oklahoma based, that is rooted in the educational institutions that are here, whether it's high school or undergraduate. I think that all feeds into the workforce that we have, that all of these companies in Tulsa, big, small, corporates, everyone has access to the talent pools that are here, or they can also access talent pools that are elsewhere and do that kind of, like you said, importing of talent, that route. And I think it's really important, or something that I've found over the years is like people at companies sometimes don't like consider it. If they haven't had the plan already, if someone hasn't laid it out to them what that local talent pool development looks like and how it's important for their company to invest in it, then it's almost like they default into what's easiest, and what's easiest is sometimes not what's right.
Well, it's not. Well, and then I think it's also interesting because, I'll meet with companies here and there, and this kind of goes back to a conversation I was having, like I said, with Broken Arrow Chamber folks earlier this week around, you'll have these companies talking about, oh yeah, our early career pipeline, people don't even know we exist. And it's like, okay, but what are you doing? You can't just throw a job on Indeed and say, we've done our job.
Yeah. Well, and how else is like a young person supposed to be exposed to a company and what they do and the types of opportunities that are there, unless they're in the schools, unless they're putting their names out there.
Right. Put your money where your mouth is. Yeah. Show up.
I didn't know.
Invite young people. Go to the schools. It costs, other than your time, it doesn't cost you anything to show up at the schools.
Exactly.
Present to the students. The counselors on the campuses want you there.
Yes.
Show up.
Yeah.
And, if you can't make the financial commitment to partner with us, cool. Are you willing to come and speak to our young professionals about your company, about your career path? I love tapping in folks who have, both very linear, very blatant career paths and talk about,
I got this degree and it landed into this certification that led me into this job, ABC.
Right. But then there's other people, we brought, Wade Dunn. Yes. Brought him in, love Wade, brought him in to speak to our young professionals. And, I love when he talks about his career path. And he's just like, inner city kid from Baltimore. He's like, it wasn't weird for me to hear pop, pop at night kind of thing. And, there was no reason if you had told, 20-year-old me where I would be today, not only would I not believe I'd be in Tulsa, but I wouldn't believe that I'd be, overseeing recruitment efforts at this amazing company. But just kind of hearing how he got where he is, I think is really important for these young people to understand, absolutely there are these traditional paths to get into careers and, put your head down and grind and, stay with the same company that you worked for right out of high school or right out of college and just build your way up. But that's not the only way. And, helping them understand, I studied emergency management and Middle East studies.
Yeah.
Is that relevant at all to my career? Not really. But going to college helped me figure out how to network. It built my network.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have gotten into sales had it not been for a friend of mine who was recruiting at a software company.
Yeah.
And we were, service scholars at our campus or at our school together. And just helping them understand how do careers work and helping them understand, again, you don't have to leave Tulsa.
Yeah.
And there are great opportunities for you. You want to work with your hands? Awesome. Manufacturing may be a great place for you to go if you don't want to sit at a cubicle all day. You want stability and you want to always know you'll have a career. Maybe we'll place you into like an accounts payable role at this company because we don't have enough people going into accounting. And that, I was meeting with Hogan Taylor last week and they're like, oh my gosh, the trajectory for people studying accounting is low.
Well, I was like, I didn't know what accounting was in high school. Like, you learn the fundamentals, math, but like the application of the skills you're learning in high school sometimes don't always translate into career knowledge.
No.
And how do you bridge the gap between those two things? It takes the companies to expose that.
Well, and understanding, whether it's accounting or marketing or whatever it may be, there's all these different types of accounting. Maybe you're a CPA, maybe you're a forensic accountant, this thing that maybe doesn't sound sexy to you could actually be the best thing for you. And it's, same thing for marketing. One of my best friends from high school, she majored in marketing and Spanish. Because of her Spanish, she stumbled into marketing for a construction company right out of high school. And that's been her whole career. And she'll tell you, if you had told me at 20 that I, in my mid-30s, would have built a 15-year career in construction, I would have been like, no.
Yeah.
But it, between her language skills and how much of that workforce are Spanish speakers and then her great knowledge that she has in marketing, that's where she is. And she's like, I'm comfortable.
Yeah,
I know way more about construction than I ever thought I would. But it works for her. And she's found an industry where she's happy, in my sales career, I've sold into industries where loved it. I loved selling into higher ed.
Mm-hmm.
Did not really love selling into like chief information officers. That was always kind of a harder conversation for me to have because I'm really an excited person. And so a lot of times that's not the same energy that you get from those very technical kind of folks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, am I like too much for this person? Am I just annoying you?
We love sales. Sales puts you through all of those things.
Yes. It's, my husband and I were just talking last night and he's like, my job sometimes is, a lot more stressful on some days. And I was like, that's my job too. He's like, sales is gross. He's just like, everything about sales would stress me out. I'm like, well, you're an engineer.
Well, that's why you found, that's why I'm your yin or your yang.
Exactly.
All right, let's wrap up this conversation with one little topic that we've kind of already hinted at, and I think you'd be a great person to ask this question. I like to kind of zoom out on like bigger picture stuff here. What's the next big thing for Tulsa as a city moving forward, in your opinion?
I do think we are very poised, like I said, to be a tech hub. Obviously, our federal government.
Yeah, we got the distinction.
There certainly are some barriers that I see compared to some of the other cities that have successfully become that. Like I said, that public transit. I'm happy that the city is making investments in higher ed because I do see that as a barrier. TU doesn't bring enough young people, and then ORU also doesn't bring enough folks who stay. And then our, extension campuses for NSU and OU and OSU are very specific on the industries that they're educating here. And so I'm excited to have seen Holbert and now Atlas, open up and see some of these programs to try to make us more competitive when it comes to our education in the higher ed space, to attract folks to come here and hopefully keep them here, because I do think that we are very well positioned for being, the next Austin, the next Denver, whatever it may be, if we continue investing the right way, and if we continue bringing the right people here, and if we continue, putting our money into the right spaces, into the right people, into the right organizations. My husband was able to take advantage of the Cyber Skills Center, which another Tulsa Remoter is, heading up and has headed up. And it's, they've had a handful of cohorts at this point. Love that investment is happening. I just hope that we can, kind of bridge a gap better between some of the legacy industries like O&G and manufacturing and aerospace into the software and cyber and tech space, because I do think that there's a gap there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That needs to be better. We need our legacy industries to not be afraid of these new industries. Cyber isn't going to take your place.
No.
Oil and gas. Cyber isn't going to take your place. Aerospace. Are we competing for the same talent? Sometimes.
Yeah.
But that's a good problem to have.
Exactly.
You want to compete for talent. That means that your city is in a good place. That means that people are coming here, that people are staying here, that people want to be here.
Yeah.
And I think that, Bynum has done a great job of making Tulsa a city that people want to be in, a place that people want to stay in. So as long as we can continue making some of these changes and adapting our city into being what this vision is and not just lose steam. I'm excited for what's to come personally.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. I think I agree with you in many, many ways, especially like the attracting industry that I that example about, being competitive for talent, for me, kind of like it lends to the perspective that at least you're thinking about the people that can take those opportunities. It's good that they have more than one place to land in. Right. So I think that that's exactly right. When you're competing for talent, you're actually really situated in a really good place as a company. And then, mobility. It's something that has come up often on this podcast, and something that I hope that there's different ways that, people like you and me who care about Tulsa can find ways to plug in to make something like that happen. I mean, I don't really know yet what we do.
I would love to see a Tulsa where, we have, a light rail that connects, downtown and major, neighborhoods into Jinx, into Owasso, into Broken Arrow, Sand Springs, Bixby, whatever, bring these people in, allow people to go out, because I do think so many folks in Tulsa, and that's another thing that, I saw it in DC. I was on the Virginia side, and, people on the Maryland side would not come to the Virginia side. People in the district don't leave the district. But it's so interesting here, because it's like our city's kind of broken into 3 sections, and then the suburbs, it's like, Admiral and North, and then that Admiral to, maybe like 41st. Yeah. And then everything south of about 41st, 51st. And people kind of typically stay in those spaces. And we've got to get better at people connecting across these different parts of town. Yeah.
These like literal street lines. Like that's all it is. There's no distinction. Like it's literally all Tulsa.
Yes.
But this kind of like, I don't know, these lines that some people make in terms of their mobility across them. But anyways, Grace, it's been amazing to have you on.
It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm really excited to continue navigating Tulsa alongside you in our many ways that we intersect. And I just want to say thank you so much for being on this episode.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Grow With Us. Thank you for listening to this episode of Grow With Us. Grow With Us is supported by In-Tulsa Initiatives. If you're interested in learning more about In-Tulsa services for job placement and workforce development, please visit talent.intulsa.com. From there, you can join our talent network where you'll get access to our newsletter, and our talent team will make sure we put the right opportunities on your radar. We put the choice to pursue a new career and opportunities in your hands. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to be notified when more episodes of Grow With Us are released. Let us know what you think about how we're doing by rating and reviewing. It really helps. Grow With Us is edited and engineered by Rant 9 Productions and Jesse Ulrich. This has been Grow With Us.